May 1945, an organization stumbled upon a treasure trove that would rewrite history, hundreds of tons of Nazi secrets hidden near the Harz Mountains. Among thousands of diplomatic cables and intelligence reports were 60 documents that mentioned one name repeatedly: Edward, Duke of Windsor, the former King of England. What in those files was so concerning that Winston Churchill and the royal family wanted to bury it to the ground forever? These weren't rumors or wartime propaganda. These were Nazi Germany's own internal records, never meant to be seen by the outside world. Let's start with what we can verify through official sources. The Marburg files were discovered near the Harz Mountains and compiled at Marburg Castle, Hesse, by American forces in 1945. These files contained at least 60 documents that appeared to contain correspondence between the Duke of Windsor and the Nazi German High Command. But here's what makes this discovery so significant. These weren't diplomatic pleasantries or routine communications. According to archived State Department records, American diplomats who first examined the contents described them as materials requiring immediate consultation with British officials due to their sensitive nature. The timeline is crucial here. These documents span from 1937, just after Edward's abdication, through 1940, covering the period when Britain was preparing for war and then fighting for survival against Nazi Germany. What could be in documents from this period that would require immediate suppression? The Marburg Files, Operation Willy. The Marburg files provided definitive evidence of the Duke of Windsor's relationship with high-ranking Nazi officials and increased the suspicion that he was a Nazi sympathizer. One of the most shocking pieces of information that came out of the Marburg files was the detailed description of Germany's plan known as Operation Willy, the actual German code name for their plan's invasion of the United Kingdom. The plot was concocted by von Ribbentrop and called for the Duke's forcible return to Spain, where, in the event of the fall of the present British government, the Duke of Windsor would be offered the throne of the United Kingdom as a puppet king and recognize his wife, Wallis Simpson, as queen, in exchange for Nazi forces being given free movement across Europe. When the Duke decided not to return to Spain, a second component of Operation Willy was put in motion. The man in charge of the operation was Walter Schellenberg, a rising star in Hitler's elite SS. As an inducement to return to Spain, Schellenberg was given permission to pay the Duke up to 50 million Swiss francs, depositing the funds in a Spanish bank account if he would sever all ties to the British monarchy and repudiate Churchill's wartime policy. Schellenberg traveled to Lisbon, where he had private conversations with the German ambassador, Baron von Hoyningen-Huene. As a last resort, an abduction scheme called for German agents to grab the Duke during a hunting party and spirit him out of Portugal and into Spain, entice him to work alongside Hitler and the Nazis to either achieve peace between Britain and Germany or reinstate the Duke as Britain's king with the Duchess by his side. This was an ultimately unsuccessful plan. But here's where the analysis gets really interesting. Another telegram suggests the plan to reinstate the Duke as king had been discussed with the Duke and Duchess themselves. However, the documents didn't indicate that the Duke accepted Hitler's offer. The most damning statements from the Duke, which were uncovered from the Marburg files, were: he wanted a peaceful compromise with Germany. He encouraged more bombing attacks against the UK to force them into peace negotiations. Examining the suppression evidence. What we can document definitively is the immediate British response to these discoveries. Cabinet records show UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill discussed the files with King George VI, who insisted the files be suppressed and never released to the public. Foreign Office correspondence from 1945, now declassified, reveals the systematic nature of this suppression effort. Documents show British officials negotiating with American counterparts about which materials would be included in any future releases of the German archives. A particularly revealing memo from the Foreign Secretary's office, dated August 1945, discusses the need to prevent constitutional embarrassment and references materials that could damage the institution of monarchy. This language suggests the documents contained more than routine diplomatic contact. Despite British pressure, Americans released the documents in 1957, but even then, historians note that certain files within the Windsor collection remained restricted. Cross-referencing with wartime actions. To verify the German claims, we can analyze Edward's documented wartime activities alongside the archival evidence. In July 1940, Edward was appointed governor of the Bahamas, officially described as an important wartime posting. However, Churchill's private correspondence, released decades later, reveals different motivations. Internal government discussions refer to Edward's known pro-German sympathies and the need to place him where he cannot influence European policy. MI5 files, partially declassified in the 1990s, confirm that Edward was under surveillance during this period. Domestic intelligence monitoring wasn't standard practice for former royals, suggesting genuine government concern about his activities and contacts. Spanish intelligence archives, released in the 1980s, corroborate that German agents were indeed active around Edward during his 1940 travels through Spain and Portugal, supporting the timeline suggested in the Marburg files. These independent sources don't prove the German claims, but they do support the basic framework that Edward was considered a security concern by British intelligence. The classification mystery. Perhaps the most revealing aspect for analysis is what remains classified today. Freedom of Information requests filed by historians in 2010, 2015, and 2019 show that significant portions of files related to Edward's wartime period are still restricted. Government responses to these requests consistently cite national security and diplomatic relations as justification for continued classification. But what information from 1940 could still affect national security or diplomatic relations in 2020? Some theories suggest the classified materials contain more detailed evidence of actual collaboration, information about other royal family members' wartime views, intelligence about ongoing German agents in Britain, details about British intelligence operations that remain sensitive. However, it's equally possible the continued classification is simply institutional momentum, government agencies maintaining secrecy long after its original purpose has expired. The historical significance. The Marburg files represent more than just a royal scandal. They demonstrate how primary source documents can fundamentally challenge accepted historical narratives. Whether Edward was a Nazi sympathizer, a naive political amateur, or something else entirely, these files prove the official romantic exile story was incomplete at best. More importantly, they show how document classification can shape historical understanding for generations. The story we thought we knew about Edward VIII was largely controlled by what documents governments chose to release or suppress. What aspects of this documentary evidence do you find most compelling? What questions would you want answered if the remaining classified files were released? If you appreciate this evidence-based approach to historical mysteries, subscribe for more primary source investigations about the royal family. And let me know in the comments what other declassified documents you'd like us to analyze. The truth is always more complex than the official story, and sometimes it's hidden in the archives.